Motorsport TV Live, brought to you by Motorsport Tickets, the dedicated motorsport experiences provider.
Hello and welcome to Motorsport TV Live. I'm Bryn Lucas, and coming up on today's show, we'll be looking back at the epic battle between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen that defined the season and asking whether this is now the greatest rivalry the sport has ever seen. We'll have insight from Autosport's F1 reporter Luke Smith, and we'll take a look at where Mercedes and Red Bull go from here. That's all coming up right here on Motorsport TV Live. Well, it was the tightest Formula One title battle in years, fiercely contested and at times possibly even overstepping the line. But a nail-biting final race in Abu Dhabi saw Max Verstappen win his maiden Formula One driver's title in the most dramatic of circumstances from Lewis Hamilton. And that's where we'll begin our look back with the almost unprecedented scenes in Abu Dhabi. And I'm pleased to say I'm joined by Autosport.com's F1 reporter Luke Smith, who was at the race. So Luke, thank you very much for joining us. To start with, you were at the race, so what were the scenes like at the end?
Yeah, it was really incredible. I mean, there were thousands of Dutch fans who made the journey all the way over to Abu Dhabi for the race. And when Verstappen made that last lap move on Hamilton, you could hear their cheers right the way around the circuit. It was really, really incredible. I was sitting in the TV pen, waiting to talk to some of the drivers after the race. And I spoke to George Russell about 10 laps from the end because he'd retired. And I said, "Do you think Lewis has got it from here?" And he was like, "Yeah, he should be okay." And then we saw Latifi crash, the safety car came out, it turned the race on its head. And I think there was a real feeling of disbelief, of astonishment around sort of the media sort of thinking, look, what's going on? How is this going to end? And in the end, yeah, that last lap, it was just so dramatic. I was stood near some Dutch TV reporters as well who were going absolutely crazy, which I'm sure is very understandable. But yeah, just I don't think anybody could believe what they'd seen, because it was such a dramatic, controversial, and I think the word you used, epic season ending in pretty epic fashion.
Yeah, I was watching from the States, and I tell you, I almost pulled my hair out in what I was watching. It was a really dramatic season, wasn't it? How inevitable was it that it would end on something like the Massey decision, should we say?
Well, I think there was always sort of a feeling going into Abu Dhabi that would something happen after how dramatic the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix had been, when we saw so many incidents between Verstappen and Hamilton. There was a feeling of, will there be another one to decide the title? And both teams made very clear, look, we don't want to win this in the gravel. We don't want to win this with the stewards or in court, which would be quite ironic with what would happen. But there was, I think, an apprehension of, would there be something that maybe happened between the two drivers? And we saw on the opening lap when Verstappen went for that dive bomb move on Lewis Hamilton into turn 6. I think that was an early taste of things to come. That, I think, would have been its own controversy had we not had the end of the race be as it was. But I think there was always a slight sort of feeling that, maybe something could happen. It wasn't just going to be a straightforward finale. When Hamilton was leading quite comfortably with, sort of a few laps to go, you thought, okay, it's been quite quiet, quite smooth by all expectations. And in the end, it absolutely was not.
Yeah, absolutely was not. Let's have a look at the stats then, shall we, of the head-to-head between Lewis Hamilton and the champion Max Verstappen. You can see the points difference, as we know, very, very close going into that final race. Equal on points, the first time since 1974 that happened. 8 wins for Hamilton, 10 for Verstappen. 5 poles for Hamilton, 10 for Verstappen. Incredible season from him. 17 podiums for Hamilton, 18 there for Verstappen, but that 1 DNF for Hamilton and 3 for Verstappen. So it goes to show that Hamilton was more consistent in finishing, wasn't it? But there were so many flashpoints. If we turn our attention to the second race of the season, the Emilia-Romagna one, how much was that was an indication that Red Bull were really, really on it in 2021?
Yeah, completely. I think that we saw in Bahrain how close Red Bull were able to push Mercedes. They took pole position, and again, that race was decided by sort of a closing lap order to give the position back. So again, it was very, very close between them. And I think it really proved that, Red Bull were able to build on the form they'd shown through pre-season testing, that the threat to Mercedes was genuine, that the downforce cuts had really hurt Mercedes for this year. And I think we also got a little taster of how things would be between Verstappen and Hamilton this year on the opening lap. They went side by side. Verstappen made very clear he wasn't going to give the position up. Hamilton had to go off the runoff area. So it was, that was a nice little taste of things to come. And it was a race that, Red Bull had real control of. I mean, had it not been for the red flag, Hamilton would likely have not scored any points because he slid off the track just before the red flag, and that was a mistake. And it was, I think it really did show just how strong Red Bull was, how good Verstappen was going to be starting the season. And a sign, I think, of the intense rivalry that would follow through the year.
Yeah, what a rivalry it has been. And I think Max had to answer quite a few questions really about his temperament and his driving style as well, because he's always been labelled as quite an aggressive driver, and that kind of played out to his advantage as the season went on. But if we look at some of these flashpoints, say with Baku, when Max was leading the race and had that huge tyre blowout, Pirelli had a lot of questions to answer, didn't they?
They did, yeah, because it was the kind of instant where the driver has absolutely no blame in it. There's nothing they can do. They're a passenger, really. And Verstappen had dominated that race. Red Bull were clearly a step ahead of the field that weekend. And it was very, very heartbreaking for Max because, he'd done everything right. And I think if the title result had been reversed, had Hamilton won the championship, then you would look back to Baku and say, well, that cost Max the title. And I think rightly so. I think that was, the kind of weekend where there's nothing that the driver can do. He's really just a passenger. So that was, a big blow for Max and Red Bull. I think that was probably their strongest point of the season, that sort of run of summer races. They were in really, really good form. But then on the flip side of that, Hamilton and Mercedes, they didn't capitalise. So obviously, Hamilton made that mistake with his brake magic. That meant he went straight on at turn one, didn't score any points either. So it could have been a very, very different title picture at that point. But Max, I think that was a real heartbreak for him. I think even towards the end of the season, him and Red Bull kept bringing that up and saying, well, look, Baku, had that not happened, then we might have already had this one. So I think that there is an argument that had Max lost the title, then you could point to Baku as being the incident that cost him the crown.
You mentioned the magic. I mean, it's the first time, I think, really in Formula One we became aware of this magic button that Hamilton had that did the opposite of magic. It was a disaster for him, wasn't it? Does that give, or did it give maybe an idea of the pressure that he was under, that he hadn't noticed that had been pressed, or that it was maybe an oversight on his part?
Well, I think all drivers make mistakes from time to time, and Hamilton was very, very quick to put his hands up and accept the blame for that. And Mercedes, the way they operate, they've got a very strong no-blame culture. They weren't ever gonna, say to Lewis, "Oh, well, you did this and that cost us this." But I think for Lewis, he just knew that it was something on his part where he made a mistake. He missed the chance, most importantly, to really cut into Verstappen's lead and make the most of his rival having that unfortunate retirement. But it was something, again, Mercedes learned from. I think they redesigned what the brake magic button looked like, how it functions, so that there wouldn't be a repeat of that. So, I don't think it was much down to the pressure, but I think it was, definitely a chance that slipped through Hamilton's fingers.
It's amazing, isn't it? 7 world championships, and a little mistake like that can happen. And for him, I mean, he didn't capitalise on Max's little issue there, should we call it? And ultimately, that lost Hamilton the title if you go race by race. But another big flashpoint came. I know it's a sort of a debatable one, obviously, but if we go to Silverstone then, and another big flashpoint when Hamilton and Verstappen came together at Copse Corner. What was your take on it at the time, and what's your take on it now, looking back?
I think at the time, we looked at it that it was maybe not quite a 50-50 racing incident, but I think there was more blame apportioned towards Hamilton. I think both drivers could have done more to avoid the incident, which is in line with what the stewards said. They said that Hamilton was predominantly to blame, not wholly to blame. So it did sort of put some blame onto Verstappen's part. And I think that was fair. I think the penalty they dished out, that's in line with everything that F1 would normally do. And in the end, it was that Hamilton did this brilliant fight back to win the British Grand Prix for an 8th time and really capitalise on it. But I think that was what stirred the pot even more, because had Hamilton not won that race, had he retired, then I think the discussions over it would have been far more tempered, far more sort of reasonable. But instead, it was really the ultimate loss for Red Bull. That, they'd not only seen Verstappen retire, but Hamilton had gone and won the race. So, so I think even with time, I still see it very much the same way. I think that it was Hamilton's fault mainly. I think that the penalty was fair. I think the fallout that followed was, I think that was the first real big point of the season where it did completely overstep the mark in terms of what was being said. Yeah, it was definitely one of the major flashpoints of this season and this rivalry as well.
Yeah, what was being said around the time for, who was at fault was one part of it, but also what was being said about the way Hamilton celebrated and didn't check on Max, although we know that's not quite true. But what are your thoughts on the way the momentum was going at that point, and also on the way that Hamilton celebrated?
Well, I think the way that Hamilton celebrated was, I think it was fine. It was that, Mercedes had got the update on Max. They had heard that he was okay. And I think it was just the narrative that was able to be pushed that, Max was still in hospital. Therefore, they could say, he was still in hospital and we saw these celebrations. So, no, I think that, a driver is always going to want to celebrate a race win. I think that it was to be expected. So, I don't think there was anything really on that front. I think Hamilton was, he was pretty open after the race about that he got the all clear on Max and that everything was okay. It was, I think that incident, it did really just stoke the fire. I think it was just a huge point in the season, as you said, with the momentum as well. I think the summer months, Red Bull was so much stronger. Verstappen, after the Austria races, was 32 points clear. He was so dominant there. And you were kind of wondering, well, where's this going to stop? Like, is he just going to slowly build this lead and disappear into the distance? So Silverstone was important for Hamilton to really sort of bring, I think, Verstappen back into it, really sort of reset the balance of it in the title race. I think that would have happened in terms of momentum, regardless of the result, like if Hamilton had won even without that crash. It was just the nature of the incident was just such it set the fuse off really for this title battle and their rivalry. And I think that's where we really sort of saw that it was I welcome this challenge and I'm grateful to be sort of taking the fight to Hamilton. It was actually, no, these two guys are going to push to the absolute limit to try and win this championship.
The next three races after that one, Hamilton didn't get a race win, but he got 3 podiums. Verstappen had a bit of a disaster in Hungary, but the next huge flashpoint, I think, came in Italy. So 4 races after Silverstone, where the drivers raced so closely together that Verstappen ended up on top of Hamilton. That was an incredible scene, wasn't it? And thankfully, the halo does exist. But again, what are your thoughts on that event that happened just there, and what it meant in the context of the championship?
I think it was a huge incident. I think that was a weekend where neither Mercedes nor Red Bull had been perfect. Both of them had been struggling. McLaren won that race on merit with their 1-2, which was really incredible. But it was a weekend where I think Verstappen and Hamilton, neither of them were quite at their best, and I think both were struggling. But it was just I think fitting for the title fight that Red Bull had that slow pit stop, and it meant that Verstappen came out of the pits literally side by side with Hamilton. It was really quite incredible. And then Verstappen, as we saw all season, he wasn't going to give that position up, and it was the kind of move that he should have backed out of. He didn't. That resulted in the crash, and as you said, his car ending up on top of Hamilton's. I think the penalty, because Red Bull took a load of grid penalties at the next race for a new engine anyway, it kind of absolved it and just dismissed it really. But I thought it was fitting. I thought it was telling that Red Bull, after that, they weren't looking to try and point any of the blame on Hamilton, that they were quite cautious about it, saying, it's a racing incident. So I think that they realised that, Verstappen had done wrong there. But I think, again, for the momentum in the title race, we had the washout at Spa. Verstappen had then won so dominantly at Zandvoort. I think that it was a race that really Mercedes needed to try and strike back at, but they couldn't in the end because of that incident.
Really signalled a strong period of time for Verstappen. He didn't finish outside the top 2 from that point of the season onwards. But it was also telling, I think, if you think back to the Silverstone incident where Hamilton didn't check on Verstappen, that at the end of that crash, or the aftermath of that crash, was that Verstappen didn't check on Lewis Hamilton. Was that gamesmanship, sportsmanship? What do you call it?
I don't know, to be honest. I think it was the heat of the moment where ultimately, if you've been in a crash, you kind of want to get out of your car and get away as quickly as possible. But I think Verstappen, he didn't think he'd done anything wrong in that instance. So I'm sure to him it was just like, I'm just going to just leave it and walk away then. But the image, that image is so, I think, striking for this season and really did sum things up. And I think that it did show the needle that is between Mercedes and Red Bull, that it was even things like that there was really no sportsmanship. And I think Toto Wolff said at some point this season, the idea of sort of gentleman agreements or gentlemanly behaviour, well, in F1 there ain't no gentleman, and it's kind of true in a way. So I think it was part of that. It just again spoke to how intense this title fight was getting between the two of them.
Now, rivalries are pretty strong things. Performances that we've seen from these two drivers in particular are something that 2021 is going to leave a mark on us because they performed so amazingly. And if you think to Lewis Hamilton in Brazil, when he started, he had to go right at the back of the grid there, and he went on to win the race, a dominant win. And if you put that in history, really, of his career, an incredible performance. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it was phenomenal. It was, for me, one of the best F1 victories I've ever seen. I thought that the way he fought back was really, really incredible. He just didn't leave anything on the table that day. He took the setback of being excluded from qualifying in his stride, and I think that really energized him and pushed him forward. And we know he had that extra powerful engine in the car that was the fresh one, but that didn't fully explain just how Hamilton was so quick, that he was able to just sigh through the field so well. I thought that his move on Lando Norris on the last lap of the sprint race, that dive bomb down the inside at turn 1, that just showed the confidence, and I think the knowledge that he had that, look, I've got to fight back, I've got to really get punchy in this, and that's absolutely what he did. So yeah, it was, I think it was a really incredible display. I think that was a big shift in the momentum as well. I think after Red Bull had won in Austin and in Mexico City, I think that Mercedes needed not only a win, but a performance like that to show Red Bull, look, we ain't going down without a fight. And I think it was, definitely up there with the all-time great performances that I've seen.
Yeah, it really was. And when you think as well that prior to that, he'd only won one race in 8. So I think it was a good indication that Hamilton was coming back stronger. But did you think that signalled that Mercedes weren't done yet in the championship?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I think that the way that Mercedes had lost in Austin, which has been such a Mercedes track through the years, I think that's what made us all think, oh, well, maybe that's it now. Maybe Red Bull have just got this pace advantage. Mercedes won't be able to answer back. But then, we saw in Brazil, which was a track that we thought would suit Red Bull, that Mercedes were just so strong, and Hamilton was able to put in that amazing display. So I think it showed that Mercedes, they weren't going down without a fight. And we know that they had stopped their development on the car far earlier in the season because they don't want to compromise 2022. But it showed that, they still had a few tricks up their sleeve. They still have more to understand with the W12 car and more performance to extract. And that's exactly what we saw in Brazil. And I think that it did set things up for those final 3 races where we thought, well, hang on, it's not over yet.
Yeah, and he went off to Qatar, he won. And then we had Saudi Arabia, didn't we? I mean, what a bonkers race that one was.
Yeah, honestly, I just struggle again to comprehend everything that happened in that race. It was, so many run-ins between Hamilton and Verstappen again showed this sort of mantra of, I'm not going to give up the corner, that I'm going to be aggressive. In the end, the FIA did have to step in. We had all the bartering, it sounded like, over the radio between Michael Massey and Red Bull as well about giving back positions. So it was, a really hectic race. And then it ended with that final major flashpoint where, Verstappen slowed to try and let Hamilton pass. It was deemed by the stewards to have been quite erratic in the way that he braked. So that in the end caused the run in between the two of them. And in the end, Hamilton was able to get ahead and put in a fastest lap late on, despite having a damaged front wing. So that was quite incredible. And it was just a weekend where you even looked qualifying, Verstappen was about to put in, I think, a lap of the gods. Like, it was a really incredible performance until the final corner when he ran wide and touched the wall. So much happened, and then for all of that to occur, Verstappen to get a penalty post-race, but it had no impact on the result. And then for them to be tied on points going to Abu Dhabi, you couldn't have written, I think, a more dramatic script for the final race of the season.
Hamilton securing his 103rd pole position, his 103rd race win there in Saudi Arabia. And what an incredible career he's had. He's not done yet, but you hint about then going to Abu Dhabi. Just touch upon Lewis Hamilton. I know that we wax lyrical about the talent that he is, but the fact he's still going, he's looking to 2022. There's been some question about whether he's going to be coming back fighting, whether he's going to come back at all, but we expect to see him, don't we, on the grid and fighting hard.
Yeah, I would be astonished if Hamilton wasn't back next year. I think that he, throughout his career, has been relentless. He's won a race in every single season he's competed, which for me is the ultimate stat to prove just how good he is. He's set all these records. And I think that we saw in Brazil just how much adversity can really spur him on. And I think we always look at 2016 and that title defeat to Nico Rosberg as being, in many ways, the making of the Lewis Hamilton that followed. That he's kind of like, I can't lose a title to that guy. Like, surely, like I'm miles better than him. And I think that maybe this year will have a similar effect on him. That he'll take all of the adversity he's faced, all of the heartbreak, the disillusionment, as Toto Wolff called it, that he's felt how this race ended. And it'll only make him want to come back stronger next year and win the title. And I just wonder if, similar to how post-Rosberg we saw Hamilton take another step in terms of performance, set all of these records, how is he going to be energized by this title defeat and the nature of it? We know that he's sort of he's fed off this fight against Max all season, that he's enjoyed the fact that this young guy, this young challenger, he's really, really pushed him hard, and it's raised both of them to another level. But yeah, I just think the next season, could we see that take another step forward? But then also Max, now he's got the championship, now he knows he can do it. How much more is he going to improve as well? It's really, really exciting.
It really is. We asked the question very briefly at the top of the show about, is this the greatest rivalry the sport has ever seen? Now, I think it's probably too early to tell, but what do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that this was really the first chapter in their rivalry. I think, yeah, if you look at maybe the Senna-Prost comparison, this is like their 88 season where it's the first time they're properly going head to head. But I think it's got all the makings of one of F1's all-time great rivalries. I think that we've seen the needle between the two teams. We've seen just how passionate it can get. We've seen these on-track incidents between them as well. And I think that given time, I think that if this does become a yearly thing, if we do now get into the Hamilton-Verstappen era of Formula One, where they're just going back and forth and really trading titles, trading race wins, that's going to be really exciting. And I think that the controversy we saw this season, and I think that the needle between the two teams, if they're both up there again next year, I don't think it's going to be more cordial. I don't think it's going to be more peaceful. I think that they're only going to take what happened this year as added fuel to the fire and say, let's go for round two.
Do you know what? If this is chapter 1, I cannot wait for chapters 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. What a book it's going to be. Luke, thank you very much indeed for chatting to us about 2021 season.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bryn.
Well, there you go. That's all we've got time for. Thanks to Luke. I'm Bryn Lucas. Join us again here on Motorsport TV Live for more season reviews and roundups. I'll see you again soon.